everyone, welcome back. Hopefully you already watched the first video on World War II. This is the second installment in this series, hopefully the last one. We'll see how long this video runs. Also, I apologize for the terrible audio quality in the last video. My microphone setup is not very good, and the ceiling fan was on, and I realized after I'd already made an almost 40-minute video that it was blowing into the microphone the entire time. So I apologize about that if that bothered you. Okay, so World War II officially begins, as far as most people are concerned, with the invasion of Poland. It could definitely be argued that it starts in Manchuria with the invasion by the Japanese, but typically scholars put the beginning at the invasion of Poland. So after Hitler seizes Czechoslovakia, going back on his word, he begins demanding territory from Poland. Why do you suppose he did this? It's because the Polish corridor separates Germany. All right, so one of the things that Hitler was very, very concerned with was creating a buffer zone around Germany so that he and the German people would always be protected from outside forces. Okay, and Poland is, if he controls Poland, he has a barrier between him and the Soviet Union, essentially. Right, so Great Britain and France make an alliance with Poland, determining that here Hitler would have to be stopped, yet neither were in position to help Poland. France is tired, and they, after World War I, instead of taking up an offensive strategy where they're re-entering the arms race like they did prior to World War I, what France does is they engage in a defensive strategy, building forts along the German border. And Great Britain is also not really in a place where they want to be entering into a full-scale war, nor are they prepared to do so at this time. They had only a tiny army, and France is set up only for defense. So Great Britain and France were hoping that the Soviet Union would help defend Poland, because it is that buffer zone between them and Poland. And also, one of the things that during the Russian Revolution that people in Russia were so angry about was the fact that Lenin ended up pulling out of World War I completely and lost a bunch of territory. And so, this starts a civil war for other reasons as well. I'm oversimplifying things, but there was definitely an interest in Poland and that region by the Russians. So everyone knew how much communists and Nazis hate each other, and there's also that Great Britain and France are relying on. The world was shocked when Hitler and Stalin announced that they were going to become allies. So Hitler, what he does is he offers Stalin essentially half of Poland. And this agreement is called the Pact of Steel. It's a non-aggression pact saying, hey, we're not going to go to war with you if you don't attack us. Further, he secretly agreed to divide Poland in between them, like I just said. Okay, so on September 1st, 1939, Germany invades Poland and World War II begins. Poland has a large army, but very little modern military equipment, and they had expected to fight along the border in a similar situation to World War I, where trenches would end up getting dug in and things would stall. However, Germans used a new method called the Blitzkrieg. Taking a point from Napoleon's book, they rush in as fast as they can with arms and armor to overwhelm the Polish lines very, very quickly. Blitzkrieg means lightning war, and it stresses speed and surprise. Rows of tanks smash through the Polish defenses, plunge deep into the country before the army can react. Dive bombers are blasting cities, destroying communication lines. The Poles fight bravely, but are suffering immense casualties and defeat. And on September 17th, this is we're looking at from the 1st to the 17th, a very short time period. The Soviet Union also invades Russia from the east, so now they're being crushed from both sides. Within a few weeks, the Polish army largely annihilated. The country was divided between Germany and the Soviet Union. So these are prongs from the attack, the black arrows of the primary assault. So they're coming in every direction they could possibly conceive of, from the German side of things, and then the Russians are coming in from the other side. The Poles stood no chance in this. Great Britain and France declare war, but it has little teeth. So on September 3rd, 1939, Britain and France declare war, but that's about all they did. They don't actually do anything. France moves troops to the Maginot Line, a line of steel and concrete defenses along the border with Germany. They have forts, etc., but they're in no position, and nor is it their strategy, to actually attack Germany. So Britain sends a small force into northern France to help out. Germany stationed troops along the side of the border opposite the Maginot Line. Germans called for a series of forts and defenses, the Siegfried. So you've got the Maginot Line on the French side, the Siegfried Line on the other side. Two sides don't fight for several months. Many historians refer to this as the phony war, because war is declared, but nothing's actually happening. There's just preparations going on both sides. Okay, war is declared on Germany. Britain's ultimatum ignored by Hitler. France will fight too, Chamberlain tells Empire. Okay, then we get to the conquest of Denmark and Norway. So Denmark, key location for naval reasons. Norway, key location, Norway, Sweden, key location for steel reserves. Okay, valuable and much needed shipments of iron ore from Sweden reached Germany through Norway's city of Narvik. Hitler fears British plans to cut off those shipments by leaving explosives or mines in Norway's coastal waters. In April 1840, Germans invade Norway, conquer Denmark along the way. We also conquer Sweden. Great Britain tries to send aid. The German Air Force prevented most of British ships and troops from reaching the country. And Norway falls in June of 1940. The results of this, they secure iron ore that Germany needs for their war effort. And they start building bunkers and sea defenses along this area. And then after they capture France, they beef this up, and what Hitler's trying to do is create like a protective cocoon around Germany in hopes that no one will ever be able to defeat them. Norway provided an excellent base for German submarines and aircraft as well, and will be pivotal in submarine warfare throughout the course of the war. So Neville Chamberlain, the champion of appeasement, ends up resigning in disgrace as prime minister. And now they need someone who has a little bit more teeth than Chamberlain had, a wartime prime minister, and he is replaced by Winston Churchill. So Winston Churchill told the British that he had nothing to offer them but blood, toil, tears, and sweat. And this is the Atlantic Wall that I was referencing earlier. So the Atlantic Wall is a series of fortifications and defenses all the way around this area. And as Germany takes more and more territory, they extend this line of naval fortifications on the coast. Looks like a picture got lost there. These are the type of fortifications we're talking about. Just massive cannons. And then there's also, bunkers, machine guns, etc., all along this line that are set up. This is another, internal picture of one of these bunker. You have this giant, just absolutely massive turret, sleeping quarters in this giant bunker. So it's very well fortified and protected against naval fire or artillery or bombing or anything that could hit this. It's very well protected, and they have everything they need to just continue firing shells their enemies. Okay, so the German invasion of Denmark and Norway, parachuting in and capturing all these zones. I'm not going to go into that. The German invasion of the Low Countries. So this is mirroring kind of the start of World War I now. So Belgium, Netherlands, Luxembourg, tiny nations declared their neutrality after World War II begins. Hitler launches a blitzkrieg attack against them anyways. Luxembourg falls in a day. Fix that at some point. Falls in a day. Netherlands in 5 days. Belgium asks for help. Great Britain and France immediately rush into Belgium and right into a trap. The Allies rush north. The German invaders cut behind them to the south and reach the English Channel. And the Allies are surrounded on land from all sides. And this is the rescue operation and the story of Dunkirk, where the British called for aid from all of their sea captains, civilian and military alike, to rush across the English Channel and get as many soldiers out of Dunkirk as possible as they're being penned in against the beach. Okay, so they're being surrounded and being pushed farther and farther and farther in until they end up here and they need to be rescued. And there's actually a fantastic Hollywood movie on this, if you're interested in watching it, called Dunkirk. The British sent every available boat to rescue the trapped forces: destroyers, motorboats, fishing vessels, ferries, even yachts. Everyone. It was all call. Under heavy bombardment, the vessels evacuated over 300,000 troops, and this saves the war for Britain because it saves most of the British army at the time. If these individuals had not escaped, Britain would have been very vulnerable to attack by Germany. However, they're forced to leave behind all tanks, ammunition, supplies, etc. So they're not now in a position to wage an offensive war at all, and they kind of have to hunker down. Not everyone can be evacuated. The remaining troops surrender on June 4th. Okay, this is the British at Dunkirk trying to escape, and while it was a loss for them, it ends up saving the cause overall. Okay, the fall of France is an unexpected sudden collapse, especially because they had these massive fortifications. They thought, we're going to be able to hold off Germany as they come across, and they turned south from Belgium, sent forces quickly into France. The French can't get off their heels. They are reeling backwards, and they end up losing territory quickly. As France nears collapse, Italy declares war on France and Great Britain. Remember, Mussolini, friend of Hitler, etc. The Germans begin their assault on June 5th. By June 4th, they enter Paris, and the French government agrees to an armistice or a truce on June 22nd. Under this armistice, Germany would take over the northern section as well as their Atlantic coast. And the south of France would remain under French control, technically, but they're basically being run by Germany. So this area, known as Vichy France, agrees to cooperate with Hitler in exchange for not being taken over. So in other words, Hitler's still calling shots, but it's less likely they will rebel because the leaders, in name at least, are French in this area. Okay, the rise of Charles de Gaulle, one of the few French generals to oppose this arrangement was Charles de Gaulle. He escaped to Great Britain and took charge of French troops there, and he sent radio broadcasts back to France and urging people to carry on the fight against Germany, and he restores a sense of honor to the French people and becomes the leader of the free French, and really keeps hope alive for a lot of individuals. Okay. This is Hitler in Paris. France surrendering. And here is Charles de Gaulle. Okay, so Britain no longer in a place to attack, standing alone against Hitler and his armies, begins to be bombarded by an enraged Hitler. Hitler believes that Great Britain would seek peace from Germany after it fell, but they don't. They fought on. They still have declared war. The Germans first have to defeat the RAF, the Royal Air Force, if he is going to invade England. And so the Battle of Britain is an air war. The first battle fought for control of the skies. Begins in July of 1940, and the German Air Force, called the Luftwaffe, are sending over aircraft as fast as they can build them and attacking Royal Air Force bases, but then they end up starting to bomb cities as well, like London. However, Great Britain had a secret weapon. Newly developed radar stations provided a warning of approaching German planes, which allows the RAF, even though the Royal Air Force isn't nearly as well equipped as the German Air Force, they are able to get up in the sky and intercept these planes that are coming to attack them quick enough that they're not just sitting ducks on the ground in most cases. I'm not going to watch, there's another YouTube video, World War II in color, the Battle of Britain and the Brits over London. If you have a chance, and there's a link right there below, I would highly recommend you go watch that film. It's really, really good. Okay. Hitler changes. By September 1940, the Luftwaffe mistakenly believed that it had nearly destroyed the Royal Air Force. Okay, Great Britain refuses to surrender. Hitler turns his rage on the cities. So he begins bombing London. Air raids take place almost every night. If you can imagine, you're trying to go about your daily life, and every night you're worried if you're going to survive that night because there's bombs raining down all over the city. It was absolutely terrifying. Ends up giving up his attempt to defeat Great Britain by air by May of 1941. Shifts strategy and tactics. This is a major strategic blunder on his part. If he had continued to do so and not allow the Royal Air Force to rebuild its air force, there is a possibility that he could have ended up invading. Britain's survival is immensely important to the war and the war effort throughout the entirety of the war. Later in this war, the country serves as a base for allies and Allied liberation in Europe. It is the staging zone for American forces later on in the war, etc. Okay. It's a German plane flying over Britain. And this is the type of devastation that we're talking about. It was just absolutely terrifying. People are hunkered down in the subway. This woman's looks like she's knitting or something, and this is how people were surviving. They were going about their lives in the daytime as much as possible, and then in the evenings they were hunkering down wherever they could. Okay. This brings us to fighting in Africa. Okay, Italian defeats. So the Italians try unsuccessfully to take British-held Egypt. Remember, they had taken Ethiopia. They're trying to expand their territory in Africa. They suffered a huge setback in Egypt. Early in 1941, Hitler sent tank units trained in desert warfare to help his forces. The general leading this is named General Erwin Rommel, and he earned the nickname the Desert Fox. He is one of the reputed as one of the best tank commanders ever, especially in the desert down there. He was extremely successful. He pushes the British forces back into Egypt, almost to Cairo. However, the Germans don't end up saving Mussolini's forces in the rest of Africa, and the British defeat the Italians in Ethiopia. So they take that back. Okay, Hitler's reluctant allies, people that are not super fond of Hitler or want to actually help the Nazis, but they're forced into it. Eastern European countries like Bulgaria, Hungary, and Romania uses threats of force to get these countries to join his side. They know they had no chance against them, so they're forced into it. Okay, these countries supply Germany with food, petroleum, other goods for the war. Hitler is trying to expand into any region that will give him resources to continue his expansion. Yugoslavia's government agrees to join Hitler, but the people and army were enraged by this and ends up overthrowing the government. Hitler orders Yugoslavia to be crushed, and they end up surrendering in 11 days. This is Erwin Rommel. I do want to note that, like the Imperial Stormtroopers in Star Wars, definitely have a Nazi influence, and this helmet or this eyewear is definitely very reminiscent of I think it's the Forrest Star Troopers helmets in one of the Star Wars movies, maybe the second, fourth, I think the fourth movie. Anyways, fourth or fifth, I can't remember. Anyways, so the Balkans is what we're talking about with these areas. Okay, so this was Yugoslavia. All of these smaller countries now are in the former Yugoslavia. Okay, this is not a country that exists anymore. Okay, Greece. Mussolini grows frustrated, tries to make up for further losses in Africa, needs a victory, and so from Albania, his forces invade Greece. Okay, they're greatly outnumbered. The Greeks fight fiercely, and in 2 months they push the Italians out of Greece and a good portion of Albania. Hitler comes to his aid. German troops invade Greece and conquer Greece. British troops hope to hold the island of Crete. It's very strategic in the Mediterranean, a good staging point for naval warfare against the Axis powers in the Mediterranean Sea. On May 20th, 1941, thousands of German paratroopers descended on Crete, seizing airfields, landing planes, quickly took the island. It was the first airborne invasion in history and provided the Germans with a valuable base in the Mediterranean Sea. And the Americans will take a point out of Hitler's book here with airborne invasions coming up when they end up entering the war, because this was very successful. This is just a funny picture of Mussolini. Okay. The invasion of the Soviet Union. Why Hitler turned on his ally. This was dumb. Earlier they make this non-aggression pact. Hitler says, you don't attack me, I won't attack you, we'll be buddies-ish. Though Hitler, because of their political ideologies being so opposite one another, Hitler actually views the Soviet Union as his main enemy, ideologically at least. And he fears that the Soviet Union would expand in areas that he wants to expand into. He sees them as a threat, and he also wants the wheat and oil fields of the Soviet Union to feed his people, and then for transportation as well. So in 1939, he breaks this temporary truce. He never intended to keep it. And in November of 1939, the Soviet Union invades Finland. The Finns surrender. 1940, after surrender in March 1940, after fierce fighting, lost some territory, not conquered. In the summer of 1940, the Soviet Union seizes Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia up there in the north. Okay, and Hitler launches what is called Operation Barbarossa. It's a three-pronged attack into the Soviet Union, trying to take it over. Okay, Operation Barbarossa, areas Germany is controlling, areas that the Soviet Union controls, major cities that he's going after. Stalingrad, named after Stalin. Moscow, very important, and then Leningrad, also extremely important as far as a strategic city in Western Russia. Okay, so leads a surprise attack against the Soviet Union, June 22nd, 1941. Catches the Soviet Union completely off guard. Stalin was in denial that Hitler would betray him. His generals told him that it was a possibility. Stalin said, there's no way, don't worry about it, etc., etc., and the Germans ended up invading. And it was at this time that his generals, people who were in power close to him, actually could have rose up against him. This was when he was most vulnerable, but they were so scared of him that they continued to blindly follow his orders. During the first few weeks of fighting, the German army killed or captured hundreds of thousands of Soviet troops. As the Germans are advancing, the Russian people are destroying factories, dams, railroads, and food supplies. Again, this is the same tactic they used when Napoleon invaded. It's slash and burn your own country in order to prevent your enemy from gaining any advantage as they take territory. Okay, this is called scorched earth policy. Typically this is done against enemies, but the Russians in this case, for a second time, are doing it to themselves. Germans appear headed for victory, and then they begin to make mistakes. They waste valuable time, allowing for fresh reinforcements to arrive. So, German engineering, very precise. They spent a lot of extra time, and when they were making tanks, they over-engineered all of their tanks. And it's taking months for these things to get off the assembly line. And they want to make sure that they have enough munitions and tanks and everything like that to continue to defeat forces, and so they start to slow down. The Russian strategy for building military equipment and getting people in the field was to do it as fast as possible in the most amount of numbers as possible. So whereas Russian tanks were a lot less deadly in World War II, they ended up having many times the number that the Germans did because they weren't precisely engineered. They were welded together as quickly as possible and sent into battle. Okay, so the Germans' invasion slows down, and then in October, heavy rain bogged the German tanks and artillery down in the mud. In November, surrounding Leningrad, it starts to freeze. And it is cold in Russia. It's negative 40 degrees. That's Fahrenheit, by the way, for anyone that ends up watching who's used to Celsius. And I don't know what it is exactly in Celsius, but in Fahrenheit, 32 degrees positive is the freezing point of water. And so negative 40 is, on the Fahrenheit scale, 70, close to 70 degrees less than that. It's going to look a little different on the Celsius scale, but it is very, very cold. German troops lack warm clothing and suffer from frostbite. Tanks and weapons broke down from the severe cold. Winter saves the Soviet Union. Very much reminiscent of Napoleon's campaign, where he rushes forward and the Russians strategically retreat. They burn everything. As Napoleon comes forward, they do the same here. Napoleon gets caught in winter. Hitler's troops get caught in winter. And it gives the Russians time to regroup. Yeah, that tank's not going anywhere. No way. It's either chained together, trying in a train to pull each other along, but that would be very, very slow going. And we are going to stop it there for the second installment in this series. Thank you for watching. Have a good day.